only man, myth, and legend. It's episode 83.
Look at you.
I told him
your AI is showing again.
I just remember facts, man. That's why I'm so
It
logical.
wasn't that long ago. It feels like it's been a while, though, right? I mean,
that was like 2 weeks ago.
Golly, it's been a second since we recorded.
It's been even more since I've seen Bill. He lives in Texas, as people heard on the episode. And I didn't mention this during the episode. This is not planned or anything, but I would like him to move back to Georgia because he's awesome.
I think
So
people got that from the episode. I went back and listened, as I do, and I think towards the end when I gave him the choice at the lightning round between Georgia and Texas, he's like, I can't do this right now. Are you kidding me? I live in Texas.
Yeah, if you know of a job to teach political science in Georgia, please contact us. We will put them in touch with Bill.
Not going to do it pro bono, I imagine. He's a capitalist.
Yeah, I mean he's a capitalist. He has a family too, so you know.
I know this episode is going to go long, and I just want to tell everybody up front, this episode is worth every second. What we did in this, we've got a guest. His name is Derek Somerville.
A returning guest.
Yeah, you may remember him from a previous podcast. And we were talking about David Ralston, the Speaker of the House, the corruption, the continuances, as he is a lawyer. He has blown the lid off this thing now, and you're going to hear all about it.
What I liked is that we didn't just talk about the facts, which are amazing, like the numbers, like the number of courts, the number of miles, the pushback.
There's a lot of principle wrapped up in this one.
We also got to talk about ideas of like the size of government, how power corrupts, and specific examples of how it has corrupted.
The nuances of your representatives communicating what they're doing in the face of corruption,
and what the best approach, if your goal is liberty, is to take on that. And maybe there might be
different approaches.
Yeah, exactly.
Sure.
Space for a bunch of approaches.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, we don't do what we're doing out of ill will, or
no, we do it out of the desire to self-aggrandize ourselves.
Yeah, right. We don't like being bombastic. What we do love is liberty, and part of liberty is also justice. It's accountability. It's principle. And I think you're going to get a ton of that. This show is very Georgia-centric, right? This particular episode is going to be very Georgia-centric, but I want, and I made the point at the end, this is happening in other states. This is probably happening in most of the states that are out there. Maybe not to this degree, but I guarantee you there is a place for the common man and woman to go out and to do what they thought maybe they've never thought about before, and that is really trying to hold their government accountable. You can make a difference, and Derek has proven that. I'm not saying he's just a normal average day go-getter or anything. He's done some things, right? I mean, he's a Marine, he's an FBI former FBI agent, he is an extremely successful entrepreneur, and so it's not out of his wheelhouse, but he had to make some serious time, took some serious commitment, and did the people of Georgia real solid here. And that's probably an understatement, I'd say.
Yeah, I think in the same way that you've got Pat McGeehan, who's leading the way to push back against bad foreign policy at a state level in West Virginia. So you would call that a leader. Like leader is, unfortunately it's been bastardized because we think, we're told that all the politicians are leaders and so forth, and often it's far from. But This is another example of a principled leader who's leading by example, and the example and the story behind it, I think, is of interest to anybody, whether they live in Georgia or whether they live in Australia, where we have like a few listeners.
Yeah, I saw that the other day.
It's cool.
Pretty cool.
We actually have listeners in Maine now, which is.
And you're so happy.
It has cured my OCD. The whole country of the United States is filled now with listeners of the rebellion.
What we have to do before we get into this interview real quick, Banks has a patron that has joined the rebellion. We always honor our patrons by calling them out. I look forward to the day when we don't have enough time to do this in every episode.
We will have to just talk really fast.
Well, there's that 15-second or 30-second skip ahead button too. If you don't want to hear that, there's something you don't want to hear. There's that nice little piece of technology sitting right there at your fingertips. So,
But yeah, so we have a new patron. If you want to support the podcast, you can go to patreon.com/rebellionpod. There are a few patrons who have found new and imaginative ways to become patrons and not do it through Patreon. So you can do that too. But her name is Cannabis Heals Me. That's not her real name, but that's what she signed up with. So Cannabis Heals Me, thank you so much. You know more about her, Shane.
I would definitely say as well, Rachel, thank you very much. You're out there in the public, and she. Well, I mean, if you just gave her, we didn't say she also runs a podcast.
Yeah,
her podcast is Cannabis Heals Me.
That's why. Okay, I just used that because I had forgotten the name that you told me.
Rachel Kennedy was actually just a guest on her show, and I'll tell you right now, she's doing an amazing thing with her podcast as well, and that's what I love. I mean, think about what we're doing these days, for God's sakes. This episode is one of those. It's a little, it's a little stoic, a little somber. It's there's some laughs in here as well.
I think we laughed at least like 1 or 2% of the time.
Yeah, 1 or 2. Now 3.
Not times, percent of the time.
Oh man, but I hope you enjoy this, and if you're listening, you're actually going to get to see this podcast. We have figured it out, done a ton of work here.
As we say that, should we look at the camera?
We've done a ton of work here in the studio, kind of cleaning some stuff up and kind of getting some things in their permanent places.
I really like the screen with the big logo on it.
Oh, I would appreciate it. It adds a nice little backdrop. What is unseen, I think, is the bigger thing here. And for a guy that's OCD and routing and wires and all this kind of stuff, this is about as much as I can stand. What's really cool is when you have your laptop up and I've got my laptop up, I can't even see the wires. So I hope that the OCD people on that side of it, if they're seeing stuff like that, it doesn't bother them too much for now.
I will take a picture of the underneath of the table and put it on Instagram and Facebook.
Yeah, it
makes me that happy.
Well, I think
so. I came over here every day. There's usually like a bunch of stuff on the table, like cables galore. Yeah. And I came over to the studio today, and underneath there are zip ties, and everything is aligned. It made me very happy.
And this is just the rough start of what's going to happen under there. Like.
Don't promise me too much.
Don't tease you. 4%.
But Rachel, thank you so much. It's really cool to see somebody support another Liberty podcast that way. It really kind of shows that your goal is liberty. She supports Scott Horton and Lions of Liberty as well on Patreon.
Great people.
Which just tells me, look at that. She's probably focusing on the message before anything else.
I love this. I love this community, man. And for as much consternation as I think that this will spread amongst some of those representatives that we've been pretty hard on.
Reps don't listen to our podcast. I actually thought that before, and then we did the one with Representative Matt Gertler.
Yeah.
And he told me for weeks after that, like,
he's gonna do any more podcasts with this guy?
He's worried about his public image, which is natural. He's like, yeah, I've got these state reps who are like, you remember when you said that on the podcast? You remember when you said that on the podcast? Were you inferring were you talking about me? And I was like, wow, that's kind of cool.
Yeah, it's I'll tell you right now, this guy who we're about to bring on, Derek Somerville, they know his name, and I can't help but think that after this, their government probably know everybody's name. So, without further ado, you good?
I'm good. Let's listen to Derek Somerville.
Welcome back to the Rebellion, Derek Somerville. How are you, sir?
Doing great.
Good to have you, man.
Yeah, a few things have changed since the last time I was over here.
You've been a busy guy.
Well, keeping a low profile, Shane.
Yeah, eyes in the back of your head.
Well, that's a whole nother conversation.
Well, I think we're going to broach a heck of a lot in this episode, in this interview. For those of you guys that don't know, we've probably done this on the front side anyway in podcast land and editing. But Derek is a former FBI agent, a Marine. He is a extremely successful entrepreneur here in the state of Georgia, and he's got a knack right now for going out and pulling up a ton, I don't want to say dirt, just truth, just facts and truth on one David Ralston, the Speaker of the House here in the state of Georgia. So since the last time we talked, you've been everywhere and doing everything. Kind of bring us up to speed, and you kind of alluded to this before we started. Is what was going on behind the scenes, even in the last interview, and just start from there and fill us in.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, number one, thanks for having me back. I hope it's
our pleasure.
That's a measure of how the last segment went, right?
Yeah.
You get invited back.
That's right.
Good.
Yeah, you don't invite bad guests back.
You don't invite bad guests back, or bad hosts. And both of you are back.
Right, we just keep bringing each other back.
So it's the evolution of this is pretty interesting because it's number one, when we last got together and talked, we and everybody else was outraged about this to begin with, right? And at that time, we were outraged on a pretty limited set of data. And at that time, the universe was, as we're talking about these legislative leave continuances, the published universe was 200 of them. And we were furious. 200. How is that possible?
That's right.
And so one of the things that brought me to the table is I had been publishing up to that point a little bit of research that I was doing, and the original, and I'm getting asked this a lot now because, obviously people are trying to understand motivation because of what I did and how I went about it.
Why is this guy going out there and doing this stuff?
And going that far out on the tip of the spear, right? And how that all came about was when the first stories came out. We talked a little bit about this. I didn't believe that there was actually a legal way for any one person to just unilaterally tell the courts no. It upset me, and I did something I've never done in my life before. I reached out to the media and I said, hey, this is a great article. This is an important article, but is this true? And if it's true, where can I get more information? And if I get more information, what can I do to be part of this discussion? Because it infuriated me just like it did everybody else. How can something as fundamental as my right to a trial, a constitutional amendment that everybody knows, how can my right to a trial, to a speedy trial, to due process, just be waved off by an individual whose certification goes completely uncorroborated, right? Completely. And so when we got together, I had done enough work to go, okay, I had pulled the records that they had already released. What we really didn't talk about is I had found a whole lot more. And what I wanted to make sure I did, because at that point in time, two things were happening. Number one is I was reconciling his own words, right? Because the speaker went to the well and he made these tremendous statements. I was not the only one doing it. This idea that it was a limited scope behavior, that he wasn't the only one doing it, that other attorneys requested leave, it wasn't him, and they said, there's 4 cases that people really care about, and I'm going to take care of them, right? And at that point in time, I'm doing what you do. To me, that's his testimony, and I'm looking at his testimony, and I'm comparing that to a piece of paper with a date and a signature on it. I'm going, one of you is not telling the truth, and I don't think it's the paper, right? I think the paper's being truthful, right?
Yeah.
And so there came a point at which I went from academically curious about whether or not this was legitimate to this starts to look like an abuse to this starts to look like an enterprise, a method for conducting himself in a way that was not only hurting people. And so the other thing that happened about this time is I started making contact with victims. And some of their stories are they're horrific. And you start looking at these stories and these real people, these citizens that these people are supposed to support and supposed to serve and supposed to defend. And I just got, I think I can say it's a podcast, I got pissed. I got angry.
Yeah, I won't have to edit pissed out.
Yeah, it didn't bias me to the results. I still was on a fact-driven mission, but at that point I thought, you know what? What I'm going to do, I'm not going to really talk about it until I get it done, is I'm going to literally go to every single courthouse where I know that he practiced, and I'm going to open up every single case file, and I'm going to go through every single piece of paper, and I'm going to get a copy of every single one of them, and I'm going to record it all, and I'm going to put it all in one place, because there's 2 things that have really benefited the speaker in this process, and one is geography, right, and one is time. And I thought, well, I'm going to take both those things and smash them into one little piece of paper so I can look at it, and once I did that, that's when I realized, okay, now I see patterns, now I see contradictions, now I see relationships, now I see something that doesn't look like the incidental use of something. It looks like a deliberate use whether the intent was ill or not, it looked like a deliberate use to manage a caseload that I'm not sure he could have managed if he wasn't the speaker. And all along the way, the treatment of this, and I'll stop. I know I get long-winded on this, but
that's why you're here.
But you kept hearing this kind of dismissive tone from him. This nothing here, and in a way, well, I'm going to set up a committee, and I'm going to pick the people and put them on that committee, and they're going to make recommendations to change a law that I didn't abuse, so that no one abuses it the way I didn't abuse it. And I started thinking, we're dumb. That's the perspective here. And of course, he confirms this later after this came out, and he effectively said that I was trying to seek relevance. In other words, I'm irrelevant. So I'm a citizen. I'm not an elected official, right? I'm a citizen. I'm not appointed by anything. Nobody paid me to do this, and nobody did anything to drive or to direct this behavior. And for it, I'm irrelevant, and I guess dumb. And so that brought me to the point where I thought, well, you know what's not irrelevant? All of us. So I'm going to get this information together. That was my motivation. And then I'm going to find the most effective way. And I didn't want to be in front of cameras. I didn't want to be on the radio. But the most effective way to get that out there was to use the media, who's been by the way, I'll throw them a plug, have been a phenomenal resource to getting the truth out there, right? Phenomenal resource. They have a utility, and that freedom that they have needs to be protected. Interestingly enough, for another discussion, there was an effort to try to curb that in this state, right?
That's right.
Pretty ironic.
We're actually going to cover that in a different show.
Yeah. So I tell you, I look back at the oath that we took as Marines, the oath I took as an FBI agent, the relevance of being a citizen of this country to whom these people have committed themselves under a similar oath to protect and defend our interests. And I think I'm doing everything that I should be doing. And if the product of this was never, well, I'm going to take down David Ralston, I don't have any personal animus towards him. I'm not motivated I don't have any hate in my heart. That's not what's driving this. I believe in grace. I believe in forgiveness. And I believe if he asks for both, he'll get it. But I also think that somewhere, hopefully there's like one citizen, just one that looks at that and goes, if that marginally illiterate blonde-headed Marine can do something like this, then I can too.
Yeah.
And what if just one more person steps up? And you know, one thing that I didn't really share yet is there are people that weighed in on some of this and took me down directions I didn't know about and made certain revelations that I made in that press conference possible. It's really the citizens coming together, and it's an awesome, awesome thing to be part of.
Yeah, and I think we need to back up a little bit here, right? With everything that you put together, and it was a mountain. I think you got together with David Clark. David Clark, I think back on February 20th, 22nd somewhere, introduced a resolution here in the Georgia Assembly to remove Ralston as the speaker. He had a few people sign on down there as representatives. During that time when you were building this case and putting together all this information that is, publicly available, took a lot of time, a lot of miles, which I'll tell you, hats off to you for all the time that you spent doing that. It's not like you're not a busy guy.
Well, I tell you, and what people don't understand, and it's okay, they don't need to understand the effort, but some of these counties are a pitching wedge away from North Carolina. One of the courthouses I was in for 3 straight days, and there was a rooster outside crowing the entire time.
Did you name him?
I did, but it's not appropriate for the show.
So I think it'd still be interesting for people to know the magnitude in numbers. Like, how long did this take you? How far did it take you? Was there any pushback in individual courthouses? Mm-hmm. How easy or how hard would this be for an individual citizen who might have less information than you have to want to get information about somebody, about court cases that are supposed to be public?
Yeah, and that's actually that's probably the best question. I'll start there and come backwards. What the media did when I reached out is said, hey, if you really want to understand this, these are public records. Just go access them. They're at the courthouse. And I thought, well, first off, the little bit of bravado. I'm Derek Somerville. I'm just going to go in there and do this, right? Like, okay, I'm a Marine. I'm just going to go in there.
Yep.
But so I drove up to Gilmer because that at the time was kind of where all the attention was. And there was a couple of cases that were high profile that I wanted to look at. And as I pulled up to the courthouse, I found myself kind of trying to steel myself. Go, okay, you just go in there, just do it. Just walk in there, just walk in there, be cool. Just tell them you want to look at these records. be cool, like somehow like I had to get all ready and prepped and I don't know, maybe a gunfight was going to break out. That's okay. Pie off the room. You'll be okay. It was the most anticlimactic request I've ever made. I walked up there, and it's a secure space. And there, there's people at the counter getting their drive, doing work with the clerk. They're trying to get, titles and stuff. And they said, "Can we help you?" And I said, "I'd like to review some criminal and civil case files." And I was waiting for, fill out this form, and then we'll do a lip print, and then you have to do 3 runs around the, and they just clink, and they opened the door, and they said, "Okay, here you go. It's back there. The computer terminals are on the wall." And I was kind of like, "Okay, I'm just going to go do this now." And so I that's what I did.
The easiest thing you've ever done with government, I imagine.
The easiest thing. Now, there was some passive resistance in a couple places, and we'll talk about that. But I would say this to the people that listen to this. If you're curious, go look, right? I don't recommend anybody do what I did. Oh, my gosh, the mileage and the nightmare, and we'll talk about that. But the reality is that these are not David Ralston's records. They are the people's records. They're your records. They're my records. And to that end, I put them all out there today online, 100% of them.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's all. You got nothing up your sleeve, nothing in the bag?
Of course I do. Yeah.
But they're all out there.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, like we talked about before, you can only unpackage so much of this, but relevant to everything that I said in that press conference, those have been released. They're out there. And hopefully you guys can help push that out there. Because one of the things that I've come to understand with this is the voice that people have through a simple share. The math, the exponential math. I've got 700 people that are following the one page I set up.
Right.
But I've got posts that are hitting tens of thousands of people because they share and then they share and they share. And that is is as weapons were to warfare as the great equalizer. That's the great equalizer in this discussion. There's no other way to do what we're doing right now. And so we need people, if they want to know, well, what can I do? I want to do something. Find it and share it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Now, when you go into these databases, it's one thing to go in, they let you in, here's the computer terminals. What is the process once you hit that computer terminal? Because I would like people to be able to walk up to one of these things and kind of really understand. Is you don't have to log in or anything like that? Is it's just one of those things you walk up? Is it kind of like a Google search, like a LexisNexis?
Well, each of the counties operate a little bit differently. There are different levels of sophistication, and this turned out, to Bank's question, which I'll make sure I hit. This turned out to my detriment because the single largest volume of case files that he had, which is 523 cases, individual case files, was in Fannin County, and Fannin County doesn't scan any of their documents. So in Gilmer County, for instance, where there were 232 cases, they're all scanned. So for the most part, I could say, oh, I see a legislative leave. I pull up the scan, I hit the print button. And by the way, there's probably going to be a couple new playgrounds installed up in North Georgia for the money I spent because they charge you 50 cents a paper, which I think is
50 cents a page?
A page. And I printed off over 1,600 pages worth of documents. So to me, this was a passive attempt to get you to... But here's the beauty of it. In Fannin County, I thought, well, instead of giving you 50 cents, I took a picture of every single one of them. So, you kind of give it to the man on that one.
Yeah, of course.
But
so I like that you say passive, like resistance, which is a very nice way of saying they're trying to stop you potentially from going forward without like seemingly telling you. But it's an extra barrier to you being able to access what should be publicly
available. Can you imagine if we actually charged them?
Yeah.
If we charge them for every page, that's if you're going to drop a bill down there underneath the assembly, if we charge them every time, do you think how long do you think those bills would be?
But I am surprised that there wasn't more resistance, and I think it's because it's not very publicly known that this is it's not talked about to go into courtrooms and to look at what's happening. It's more known that you can file a Freedom of Information request, and that is harder to do.
Yeah.
And I wonder if this gets more publicity and people start to think, hey, why don't I go see if my local court is actually operating correctly? If they start to put in more passive, the very nice way that Derek put it, passive ways to resist.
Well, number one, I spent what may for many people be a rent or mortgage amount of money just to make copies.
Yeah.
Right. And I didn't spend really any in the worst place because I just took pictures and then did that all back at home. Secondly, a piece of paper per pound out of a bag probably cost about 0.03 cents.
Yep.
So the markup to get from 0.03 to 50 ain't printer ink.
You got to have government inefficiency in there somewhere to get a 50 cents.
And here's the thing that gets people. You go, okay, 50 cents maybe doesn't sound a lot. Every 2 pages was $1.
Yeah.
Right. It's simple math. It gets pretty
divided by 2.
Yeah. So, but to your point, there was never a line. I never waited for a machine. Here's what I learned. There's a whole army of people that research titles all day long, and those are the only people that I ever had to compete for a terminal with, and that really never happened. I definitely felt a little passive resistance in his home seat county. One of it might have been because what I was asking was so big, because I thought, well, it's not my fault you haven't scanned your stuff. We've got 523 cases. You need to go pull them. And, and I was polite. I will tell you, you're not going to get anything done by being a jerk. I was polite. I was reasonable. And the employees were phenomenal, right? They were just phenomenal. In fact, in Fannin County, I'd literally intended not to be funny, to send some flowers up after the fact, because it was these nice ladies that were really in their retirement phase and volunteering. Right. And they had to go and to all these different years and pull them. And then when I got done, take them back. And and of course I'm in their space. But there were a couple things that were interesting. Number one is people that were from the area were allowed to just go pull them themselves. And I said, I'm happy to pull them myself. I have like tremendously chronic OCD. I'll put it right back where it belongs. Right? Shane and me. I'll put it right back where I found it.
That's the guy with the OCD right there.
Yeah. See, now I feel like we have more of a connection.
He makes me look real mild, which is weird.
Yeah. But there was a point at which, and I think she was probably a nice lady, but the clerk came over, and I know that she's very close to the speaker, and said, "Could I have a word with you, please?" And I thought, well, here we go. I mean, this is it. But this isn't going to be much worse than walking the streets of Mogadishu. I mean,
sure.
What are they going to do? And well, I need to let you know that you're going to be doing a lot of copies, and they're 50 cents a piece. And I'm like, yeah, that's cool. Yeah, 50 cents, right on. I can work with that denomination wonderfully. So there was a lot of that. You don't feel welcome here.
Right.
That was going on.
That's an interesting concern to bring to somebody. Hey, I just wanted to make you know it's going to,
especially
it's going to be expensive.
And the setup was this. The setup was this. Do you have a minute? I'd like to talk to you over here. Well, we're not talking about my body odor, or my offensive music.
Right.
You're going to tell me what the price per copy is. And so I think that was more to go, listen, I'm in charge here. This is my office. I know you're here. And I know you're here.
So then that means probably that she knows that this is like pushing the passive resistance that she wants to establish. And there's probably a little bit deep down, a little bit of shame of doing this in public, because she probably shouldn't.
Yeah, well, and as we've unwrapped this, her name is all over these papers.
Ooh.
Right? So, you can't, and I'm not suggesting anything.
No, but she doesn't want her name out there.
Yeah, and you know what? I worked very hard in that time to show her courtesy, and we had some nice conversations, and I think her guard came down.
Yeah.
But I think there's this predisposition that says, hey, wait a minute, Banks, you can't come in here and pull 500 records. Well, you know what? You can.
Yeah, you should.
And as long as you're not doing it, listen, don't go do it to be a jerk. But if don't do it because you can do it, although you can. I mean, there's no.
Yeah.
My point is, like, be civil about it, be reasonable about it. But on the same token, I didn't give off any air that, well, I guess I'm just not going to do this.
Yeah.
Well, you don't want me here. I'm going to go out and choke that rooster outside. So to your question, I drove from our county, an hour and a half up and back, so 3 hours each way, 35 times.
Wow.
I drove from Gulf Shores because I got down there with my family. I'm at the beach. I had all this stuff laid out, and I realized I was missing some things, and I thought, you know what, I'm not going to sleep without. So I got my car, and I drove from the shores of Alabama to Gilmer County, and I kid you not, Banks, it's interesting there, and this might be by design or not, there's no chairs with the computer stations. They're up high, so you can't sit, right? So you can't get comfortable. And I bellied up to that machine, and I worked from the moment they opened the door, until they closed it at 5 p.m. So I made 600 individual photocopies. I went through reams of paper. I never ate. I never went to the restroom. I never left that spot that entire day. And the whole time I felt the sense of, now is the time. You've found the 4-leaf clovers. Pick them all. So it's well, a couple thousand miles, filling up that car every 52 miles because of the gas. It was bad. I mean, it was a lot of work, but it's done, or at least the first phase is done.
Well, and that's the thing is, I didn't see anybody else doing this. There were some guys from the AJC out there, and definitely tons of credit to them.
Yeah, they did a good thing.
They did a really good thing of trying to bring this out, which you're not going to see a lot in the media. And what's crazy to me right now is you don't have Democrats talking about this, because I think, if I'm a Democrat, if I'm looking at strategy, is wait till the next election comes around and then have all these Republicans that never ever said anything about this guy who's protected some of the worst dudes probably imaginable through continuances where they never saw inside of a courtroom, and then hammer down.
No, I mean, let's be honest. I've tried to stay away from the political side of this because it was not necessarily relevant to anything I was doing, and it would not have been appropriate leading up to the release of all this information. But if you care about the Republican Party, or you care more for it than the Democrats, if you're a Democrat, this is a gift. It's the biggest gift ever.
Yeah.
And if anything, they should be upset with me because I took their October surprise. I did. That's what I did. I laid it all out there because my view the whole time was, oh, by the way, if I'm out there doing this, somebody else is too. And so I had another motivation behind this, and I think I shared this maybe not on air last time, was my fear was that the same thing that benefited Ralston in the courtroom was going to benefit him in this public discussion. Time was going to pass, the interest was going to atrophy, and then the people were just going to move on, and the legislators who gave him the power that he now holds would not take it from him. So I made this decision one night. It sounds kind of odd, maybe arrogant, and I said, you know what? I'm going to take the decision from the entire legislature. I'm not going to give them an option to not. I'm one person.
You got to do it.
I am going to take away the option to not address this, and not because I meant anybody ill will, but because it was the responsible thing to do. Like, you can't ignore this. It's not going away. The damage has been done, and yes, nothing brings back Amanda Mosher's daughter and her husband, but you know what? Maybe a little closure would help.
Yeah, some justice, and we're sorely lacking that here in the United States, and not just in Georgia. And to kind of piggyback on what you're saying in terms of this thing atrophying, in terms of the interest over time, that's because every day, 24 hours a day, 365, the mass propaganda machines that are out there have this thing dialed up to 100 all the time, and so it's just, all right, today, it might be Ralston, but tomorrow we're going to move on to the Mueller report. We're going to move on to something else where, it's now we're talking about Venezuela or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And state, local politics kind of take a back seat. They fade away, and then they never ever see any justice. This thing, I'm glad. I'm glad to hear that you're going around doing, kind of a press junket, but to back up even further, when you compiled all this, when you went through all the standing, the not eating, the photocopying, spending your life away from your family, away from your business, doing something that, as a citizen, most citizens will never do. This, to put this in front of Georgia in just a clear, concise fashion, the way you did. You had to have a little bit of help on the inside. David Clark,
no.
Well, just to bring it to the media's attention down there.
I got asked at the end of it, do you have a political motivation here? And I said no. And the reporter said, well, you're sitting there with David Clark. And I said, yeah, you don't come here if it's just me.
Right.
So what David did, and David, a veteran.
And that's what I'm driving at.
Yeah. And a guy that's going to err on action.
Yep.
Right? Like that's true. But what the partnership between David and I was ideal, because what David was able to do was actually was able to get the cameras in the courtroom, right? Otherwise, again, here's the thing we're fighting with as citizens: irrelevance.
Yeah.
I mean, the speaker said it, right? You're like, well, it's just irrelevant, and up.
His guy is he's looking to be relevant.
Well, right. Well, you listen. If you're trying to become relevant,
Right.
it's because you must be irrelevant, right?
Right.
And so herein lies the issue, and it's interesting what a 47-minute press conference will do for your relevance.
Kind of buzzing off the hook these days, are you?
Not saying anything, although I felt pretty relevant, when I became a Marine. I felt pretty relevant as just a young patriotic 10-year-old. But there has to be these partnerships, and there's a number of things that are coming out of this. We can't, the expectations that we have on our elected officials are fair, but at some point they want to be treated the same way we want to be treated. And not everything's as simple as it looks. And I'm not being overly sympathetic, but David Clark. Here's a great example of a symbiotic effort. David needed somebody like me to come forward and give what he was saying the horsepower, right? It was directionally pointed in the right direction, but there wasn't enough thrust to get it out of the atmosphere, right? I have all this horsepower, right? I have the ability. I have the right time at the right place, right?
Skill set and everything else, yeah.
The ability to take 2 months and basically neglect everything. That's hard to do for most people. So somewhere in here, I think there's a takeaway that says sometimes we got to be careful. Maybe that person, that elected person that we think isn't doing anything, wants to and needs the partnership or is doing something, and it's just not yet evident to us. And so I think what's coming out of this is, for me at least, is I want to look twice next time at inactivity and go, okay, if the capability were there, he'd have done it, right? This took a bit of a partnership, but I will say this, and I'll hold to this, and David will tell you this. I didn't receive it. David never provided me with any direction.
No, and that's not what I was getting at. Is more or less having somebody as a representative who will get press coverage.
Yeah.
To obviously, we've got a resolution that he put forth. And then to follow up, months later, I'm sure, the pressure, as far as we can feel pressure, we're a little numb compared to a lot of the people who are out there, which is, I think, a good thing. Somebody's got to get out there and die on the wire. I mean,
well, you got to know that if you're going to take if you're going to take a place of leadership in a complicated discussion, it's going to be uncomfortable.
And that's you're doing.
If you do it right, it's going to be uncomfortable,
and it should be.
Yeah.
That old saying that if you don't have any enemies, it means you never stood for anything. And I feel like that is the overwhelming majority of the representatives and senators in the state. That's those pressures that we talked about last time you were here when we were saying it's just those pressures. I don't understand. We don't understand that, and I'm guilty. I'll tell you right now. I am guilty of one of those people that will go out and just lambaste representatives until I get something
really, Shane?
in the public eye.
I'm not. Banks,
do tell us.
Yeah.
So I appreciate the nuance that Derek brings.
Oh, yeah.
And in a way, even though you guys both come from a background of Marines, you guys have different strategies on that aspect. Shane is really in your face sometimes.
I'm a bull, yeah.
And but the nuance that Derek brings in the fact that, hey, it's more of like a stoic approach. There's no productivity to being overly aggressive towards somebody because then there's nothing from it.
Well, I think
there's no fruits.
But to be fair, I think it's communication, right? And there's a communication behind the scenes that happens where when I'll do something like this, there's no call, there's no text, there's no email, there's nothing.
Yeah, you scare people.
Well,
they're frightened of you. Have you met yourself?
Look at my police record. There's nothing there. That's the thing.
Well, not nothing.
Nothing.
I was in a lot of courthouses, Shane.
He's such a boring candidate. I remember when I interviewed Shane, I was like, okay, now you got to tell me like all the bad stuff. He's like, I'm boring. I'm like, I don't believe you.
Yeah, that whole General Mattis saying, right, is go up there, be professional, be calm and courteous, and have a plan to kill everybody.
Yeah, no, and I think that's and to me it's not dissimilar, and I appreciate you pausing on that, Banks. It's not dissimilar to the concept around a use of force, right? So if I'm dealing with a suspect, and it's going to take some force to get them to comply. Too little force, and they're not going to respect me, right? Too much force, and they're going to say, no matter what you do, you're going to hurt me, so I'm just going to resist. But just the right amount of force that says, you know what, every time I do this, it's a little uncomfortable. That guy's not doing it to hurt me. I'm hurting me.
Right.
I'll do what he wants me to do. There's a sweet spot in the middle that you get no respect, but you might find some respect in there and an understanding. And that, I learned a lot from that on a lot of these matters. And by the way, to your point, if anybody at this point is unsure about how committed I am and how far I'm willing to go, if anyone has confused my balanced demeanor with what I'm capable of, that's it. That would be an unfortunate underestimation.
Yeah, and it often happens. And I would say this to the representatives that are out there that I have called to the carpet is, hey, if you want to talk, I got an open line. Derek, people who know me. If you want to tell me something's going on behind the scenes, so at least I know, fine, by all means. But here's the thing is, you can't expect people to know what you're doing out there. And what one of my passions in life is holding public officials accountable. You're a public official. So when you have something going on, either, in public most of the time, don't be surprised when your constituents ask you for a public statement on that issue. It comes with the territory. Yeah, I tell you right now how often you do something like this and people come out of the woodwork to go, oh, I can't believe you're doing this. I can't believe you're going after, one of our representatives. Like, they're a public official, guys. What's wrong?
So a lot of that is because of tradition. It's just because we're not used to things, and human beings don't like change for the most part. They're not all weird, all weird like us who just want to see a whole new, more prosperous and peaceful world.
Stir that pot.
But as much as I think there definitely is balance, I think we can also come to a optimistic outview that there's a time and place for different actions and for different people who have different ways of operating. I do think it is important to remember, though, that these are elected representatives. The nuance is necessary. I think it applies perfectly to how you interact with other individuals, citizens, whatever you want to call them, that are just living their normal lives. These are not people who are exactly living a normal life. They have taken the responsibility that is not a right. It's not a right to be a representative, right? And nobody's forcing you to do it either.
No, you volunteered, for God's sakes.
So there is that responsibility, which I think leaves room to be more harsh. And I think that
you
need to be more harsh to some degree in some
and
instances, and from some people.
It's not personal at all.
And maybe it's not about being more harsh. Maybe it's just about saying, you have signed up for a heightened level of accountability, right? But let me tell you that job's not that sexy. So for anyone who thinks like that's a fat cat job, and they sign up for some pretty tough days. And I'm not trying to go on a defense tour for them, but
don't do that.
But no,
you're gonna lose.
Yeah, well. I mean, we're just going to use more tape, but the reality is that we do have to recognize that you decided you were going to go serve, and you did that because you were willing to deal with this stuff. But you can't go through that math that says I'm willing to deal with that scrutiny without recognizing that you're going to deal with it because it's a tough job. You're making a decision to do that, and and I get it that you say, well, they volunteered, but they also volunteer to deal with some crap that the rest of us, for the most part, just don't have to deal with, right? So
I agree.
So I think it's a balance, and I think on the same token, I would also suggest this. That the elected official that doesn't ever say anything, doesn't ever return a call, won't tell you what they're doing, silence from the powerful is not a good thing.
I agree with you.
Right? And one of the themes that I really drove home with this, I'm going to continue to, is transparency and truth. Like, don't give me your analysis. Don't blot. If you've got nothing to hide, then let's just have transparency. Let's have truth. And then if we're going to have conflict, let's have conflict because we disagree on the truth, but not we disagree on the silence, right? Yeah. That's the problem.
The truth is a good strategy. I tell that to Representative Matt Gertler, who I work with often. He literally, there's a lot of things that the liberty movement wants from him.
Sure.
They want perfection. And then there's all these issues you're going from lower taxes to not having to give your pets the rabies shot. And the way to deal with the fact that he's only one person and can't do everything, I've told him, and we've kind of come to the conclusion it's not just for me, is to be truthful and to be like, hey, I couldn't focus on your rabies bill this year because I've got these other things and I just can't do it. And that's the truth. But usually, unfortunately, that's not the human's natural inclination because they want to protect themselves. And I think pushing that message of just focusing on the truth and be like, hey, yeah, I haven't paid attention to that. Hey, yeah, I was working. I don't know. My kids are having a hard time in school, so I'm paying more attention to that. I really don't know what I'm talking about on this one issue.
I think
I think that's fine.
No, it is fine, and I just want to inject this. One of the things about our society is that it is, as much as people don't think, it's either very forgiving or very forgetful. But either way, when you own your issues, you take all the power from everyone else who wants to tear you down with them. You just simply say, you know what? By the way, it's not that I had something more important. I really messed that up. I thought I was doing the right thing. I did the wrong thing. I'm sorry. You didn't elect me to do that. I've learned from this. I will do better next time. You know what someone's going to do? They're going to pat you on the back and buy you a beer.
Right?
So how do we make sure the representatives know that whatever the different approaches are, the Derek approach, the Shane approach, the Banks approach, that there is that possibility for redemption, forgiveness,
it's communication,
acceptance.
Right? And there's something about leadership that kind of probably goes unspoken with some groups where it doesn't with others. But the key aspect, and what I harp on all the time, is it's not just politicians. It's our society. We don't know how to communicate effectively with each other. We don't know how to sit down and have conversations and just dialogue back and forth on topics, and staying focused to where we can come to either a resolution or just a difference of agreement. The other thing, I think that is nuanced now in this day and age, which has changed, is you have quite a few of the people who are in leadership positions, or I should say representative type positions down there, that don't understand social media. And in this day and age, with especially with our generation, we expect to see things on people we're following, our representatives, on social media. Whether and if they get asked, hey, where are you on this? There needs to be a response. And the thing is one of the things I think they should probably do a much better job of: post something on, hey, this is where I'm standing. What do you guys think about this as representatives? I mean, how hard is that? Because now what you're going to get is you're probably going to get some back and forth between the people who are actually engaged in your constituency. And it might not all be flattering, but at least there's a discussion. And if we can communicate more effectively and have more of it with those representatives, I think we avoid situations where I have to be the guy that looks like a complete, a complete bull or bully or anything like that, where I'm just trying to get some answers.
Well, I think it's a little bit more complicated than that. So I agree, number one, on premise what you're saying, but then you have to introduce the complexity of power, right? And so you have power, which complicates the entire communication. And when I look at what, just kind of conceptually, what affects how we communicate, especially on a broader level, there's the logistics of it all, right? Just, what are my tools? How do I get to people? All that piece, that might preclude me being an effective communicator because I just don't have the logistics mastered, right? Then that's an agnostic concept. It just is what it is. It's
right.
Logistics, and that's hard. The next piece I look at is, well, what priority do I give it? Right, I gotta prioritize talking to Shane. Number one, I gotta figure out how I'm gonna do it, and number two, I have to actually prioritize it. And then the final piece of that, I think, is it's how much do I value you as a person. And so here's the sense I get is I think the logistics are in place to communicate in a way that obviously mankind has never been able to communicate. Right. How people prioritize the people in their lives, constituents and otherwise, well, that's a pretty complicated discussion. But when you start looking at the value that some of these powerful people put on the people that they really are accountable to me, we get back to the point of irrelevance. And I think, you have the logistics, you might not have the priority, and you probably don't have the priority because you don't see value in me. So I'm not as ready to let them off the hook, because I think if you want to talk to me, you can reach out to me, or if you want to talk to or me as the public, we're here. Just do it.
And that's the thing is, if you're going to have a conversation with us, right? That conversation needs to be a public conversation. I don't don't need people to tell me things behind the scenes. I can have, hey, it's okay. We're working on it, man. But you can also say that publicly. You can also come out and say, hey, listen, this is not unnoticed by me. I am doing my diligence right now. I don't even hear that a lot of times out of these representatives. And that's what bothers me is, hey, listen, I understand that this might be a sensitive subject for you. You might want to proceed with a lot of caution out there as things are going to shift wildly. Alliances are formed and broken and everything else. But at the same time, let me at least know that you are digging into this and doing some diligence.
At the end of the day, I think it comes back to, do you really have a servant's heart? Are you really prepared to eat last? Are you there? And let me tell you, when you interact with these people in the subject of the day here, and you look at a lot of the complexities and the track record and the way the money flows in, what it gets spent on, and where it goes, the $178,000 in campaign contributions to the people that now need to make a decision to pull him out of there, right? Yeah. You look at all this stuff and you go, well, wait a second. At the end of the day, if as we learned in the Marine Corps, if I'm always willing to eat last, for the 2 months I was doing this, guess what I did? Every day I ate last. I ate after everybody else ate because I was busy doing the thing that I thought I was supposed to be doing. So, I think there's some mechanical concepts to what we need to be able to do in order to maximize the communication. But at the end of the day, if you don't see the value in the individual that you're trying to get the message to, why would you invest in that company or that stock if you don't see any real value in it? And it's interesting because you can create value pretty quickly, right?
Yeah.
Right? Somebody comes up and I don't know him. I don't want to talk to him. He doesn't have any real value to me on the street until he puts a gun to my face. And then I've got all the time in the day for him.
Yeah.
He's the most important person in my life. So, and I'm not advocating for putting a gun in someone. My point is circumstances can make people
Of course not.
can make people valuable.
Right.
Yeah.
But what I look at it, and I'll stop here, is that, well, what makes them valuable is what you don't know about them, because they might have people have reached out to me from all over the state and given me little morsels. And if I placed no value in it, I wouldn't open up all of these messages, but I do. Mm-hmm. And if I didn't value them, I wouldn't respond to them all, but I do. And it isn't a function of trying to manipulate. I think it's pretty awesome, and I'm not, I don't have any political ambitions, but if I did, I think it'd be awesome to have people look at me and go, you know what, I've got a question, can you answer? And if I don't, I'd say I can't, but I would be so honored that they're asking me. And then if it was logistically difficult, well, we might have to do different things, but the priority would be there and the value would always be there. And so, anyways, I know we're a bit off point.
No, now, I think this is the conversation that needs to be had, and you're busting over there. So
I find it fascinating that we're all talking about our different view of how this is happening. We mentioned power and value and activists, and they play perfectly in line and kind of shine a light on the problem in politics, anyways. You're talking about how, and this is why activists die off. So you got people who get, for whatever reason in their life, they have free time. I know activists that have gotten involved in politics because they quit their job or got fired, and now they have all this free time, so they just start doing something. Or whatever issue is important to them. Or there's a big issue like this one where there's more of an emotional connection. Oh, people are being hurt by these actions. That's bad in general. And then they get involved in politics, and most often when a politician has a problem with an activist, and I'm not trying to lump all politicians together.
Generally speaking,
there's some that have a servant heart and so forth, but this is actually at the crux of the problem, because the system exists in a certain fashion that it leads politicians to take this action that I'm going to talk about in a second, and the activists to go in the other action. So if there's a problem, because of the power structure there is, because there's too much power at the top and seemingly not enough at the bottom, even though that's where actually the power resides,
right,
or is supposed to reside. So you've got the politician that's confronted by an activist who is either a problem, not necessarily because of intention, but because it takes time to deal with activists. It takes time to deal with an email, with a phone call, with somebody talking to you and saying, hey, answer this question, and you don't know the answer. They'll say, here's this excuse. And if you believe them and just leave them alone, then the politician has won. He's dealt with that problem, whether it's for a good reason or a bad reason. And so most of the time, if you're more and more of a problem, again, it doesn't matter if it's good or bad, you're given more and more excuses or access. And the access is often information. And so the politician, for good or bad, is saying, well, here's the information that is going to make you feel better. Often that information is not in public, because that's the other aspect of politicians. They don't want controversy. Controversy means that they might lose an election. So they're keeping everything in-house, and it normalizes the fact that the information isn't public. All these people with good intentions mostly are coming in saying, hey, what about this? What about this piece of legislation? What about this problem? And the politician is giving them information, and there's no natural proclivity for the system to say, no, all this should be public. And it festers and it festers. And that's why sometimes you have these things that seem like they're a big surprise. Like, oh, how did that happen? How was the politician so out of touch with the people? It's because you've got these two bubbles. You've got this bubble of politicians and activists. Some get tired of it and fall out because it's not a very natural environment. And then you've got all these other people who have these activists in between the Republican Party, for example. But they have all this other knowledge that the politicians are giving them. Yeah. But there's no natural, not enough people, at least, the journalists are kind of supposed to be this, making everything public so that it doesn't fester at the bottom end. Because most people, if you say is politics a dirty place, yeah, it's
they're
known.
Commonly known as liars and cheats and crooks.
And I think that's what gives the possibility for somebody like Ralston to be so detached from reality and say, like, well, there's nothing illegal here, there's nothing immoral here, there's nothing wrong here, and to continue, because there's this history. 2006 or 7 when it started. No wonder he thinks that this should just go on forever.
Yeah,
it's come, it's gone, it's come. He's washed away.
It's part of his life now.
It's come back.
It's his culture.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the mosquitoes returning every year, right? Yeah, they'll be gone. They'll be gone soon enough. I agree with everything you say, and I don't know. I think it all comes down in my mind as I watch this behavior is like somehow at some point, this man thinks he's more important than I am, and what makes him more important than me? Is it because he's the Speaker of the House?
It's the power.
It's the power,
right? It's
billions of dollars that he gets to kind of maybe we're going to do this, maybe we're not going to do this,
and so. The behavior that I saw evolve is one that you can immediately check by getting the power in check. Why would one have the ability, and we could argue this stuff all day long, but this is a leadership role inside the House. Why should you be able to do that for 10 years or 16 years? Why could you do that? Because I think that you should shake the Etch-a-Sketch every 8 years and say, well, you can only accumulate so much power in this period of time.
Or maybe that power even within a limited amount of time, shouldn't have that much. He appoints people.
That's it. That's where I was going. I think that the appointment
We're so
process.
In sync. It's awesome.
No, you're right. So then say, well, you don't get to pick all the captains of the teams. Period. Number one. Number two is you can't create this quasi Ponzi where all the money comes to you and then you spend it out on everybody else. You can't. I mean, you can do it legally, and I know that the policy gurus on this are going, well, Derek, you didn't consider this and this and this. Yeah. No, I didn't. But I will tell you this. I've done very well. I haven't cut $180,000 in political campaign money to anybody. But if I did, I'd expect them to carry a phone that only rang when I called. So, and we talk about...
And it happens.
And it happens. And we should talk a little bit about some of these deals where you see him, well, maybe we should come back to it. Let's talk about a good example where this exact problem.
Examples are awesome.
Okay? So let's take his small little law practice up there in Blue Ridge, and the last two, and I think the only two attorneys that ever worked for him, Amanda Mercier and Clint Bearden, both somehow became Superior Court judges.
Weird how that happens.
Wonderful. And Amanda did it after 9 years, and it was her very first law job ever. And so she got out of law school, became a lawyer in a small little office in a North Georgia town, and 9 years later is a judge. And if I asked my kids from the point that they had any concept of what a court was, I'd say draw a judge. They draw an old person. Because there's wisdom and and by the way, Amanda, and I mean this sincerely, she literally may be a brilliant legal mind. So it's not about her.
What's funny is though that you actually can't become a judge before practicing law for 7 years and being in good standing. So 9 years is not even that much because 7 would be like the minimum.
Right. So here you go. You've got 100% rate of your attorneys becoming judge. Now, by the way, they've got to get selected by a selection committee. So I got some pushback, and someone said, well, Derek, I don't know if you understand the process, which is, let's talk at some point about Speaker Ralston saying, I don't understand the criminal justice system. There's like 3 things they teach in the FBI, but I digress. So he says, well, Derek, there is a selection committee before the governor can appoint them. I go, well, okay, so the abuse is even that much worse. So now you've got your 2 people that work for you, and they become judges. And then your campaign money, which other people put money into, you're using to make campaign donations to the person that worked for you who's now going to run for a judge. And by the way, she's sitting on the bench hearing your cases you had when she was your employee, and she's approving your legislative leave, right? And you look at that and you go, okay, wait. So people go, well, why didn't the judges do anything? Oh, I don't know. Maybe because she's being financed by him and he was her only legal employer before she became a judge.
Yeah.
And it gets better, right? So you look at Amanda Mercier and you go, okay, well, now she's getting money from the Speaker of the House. And of course, that had nothing to do with her becoming a judge or a Clint. And then she's getting money funded to for a campaign, which, by the way, she has no opposition for, but that's okay too. And then you look at it and you go, well, who else is giving her money? Oh, you know who's giving her money? James Bolly's giving her money. And you go, well, who's James Bolly? You go, well, James Bolly was the personal attorney to Speaker Ralston when Speaker Ralston was going before the state bar for doing what? For delaying justice with legislative leave. Well, James Bolly's donating money to a judge, and you go, well, that's his right to do, except James Bolly was appointed by the Speaker to the Judicial Qualifications Commission that does what? It investigates judges. Now, here's the question. Does it investigate judges that they give money to? And you start looking at this and you go, and whose head isn't exploding right now, right? You go, okay, wait, let me unpackage this. So there's a guy that sits on an investigative panel whose job is to investigate judicial misconduct, who's donating to the judge, and he's also the attorney to the person who appointed both of them. And it's at some point, it's like taking a microphone and shoving it up to a speaker, right? Like something. Yeah, exactly. And you know what? Here's the beauty of it all. I haven't even got started.
Wow. Well,
right.
But you don't need much more to be like, there seems to be a problem here. There seems to be like, this cannot exist without festering into something.
Well,
some kind of moral hazard.
Why don't I give you one more piece?
Yeah. Well,
so the other person that sits on the Judicial Qualifications Commission that is Speaker Ralston's appointment is a guy named Richard Hyde.
Yep.
And Richard Hyde also donated money to Amanda Mercier. And it just gets so much better. Just a few years ago, he didn't have those appointments because it was an independent body, but he helped pull it under the control of the legislature in 2016. And here's the thing, again, we're all dumb. Don't look over here. There's nothing to see. But you could see this all turn in. You go, you know what? There's no chance in hell any of us are ever gonna win.
So he passed the bill that then gave him more control over the moral hazard he had already created.
Yeah.
And then
by having those two
and
people
then centralizes
under
power in the hell with the separation of power.
No.
And some people might not even understand that there is literally no bill over the past 10 years that passes unless Ralston wants it to pass. He appoints every single chairman of every single committee, and so those people are indebted to him. So there's even more rules that can change things up. So he has all the power. And I told this Shane just the other day. If you think that Brian Kemp is the new governor and Jeff Duncan is the new lieutenant governor, they just got in. You could argue that Ralston is the most powerful person in Georgia.
I would.
He's got the experience. He's got all his foot soldiers, and that's not even an exaggeration. If he's got the power over them, like if he doesn't want to have somebody but chairman, he just takes it away.
And he's got the power of the budget, for God's sakes, in terms of donations coming in.
Yeah.
I mean, when you look at who this guy is in the centralization of authority and power that he has collected underneath the legislative, no,
it's unbelievable. And if you think about it, just look at it from. And by the way, we could be talking about a third world country right here, but we're not.
Well, because it's got this nice veneer over it. I've
been talking about banana republics for years.
No, this is it.
About respect, and there's a constitution, and it's got nice words in it, and there's some nice lawyers who write it up, and they say a prayer every day during session.
Yeah. So is there puppies
and pledge the flag?
Yeah.
It's all beautiful.
Yeah, it's horrific. And if you think about this, as we just kind of unpackaged that one example, and again, I'm not suggesting that Amanda Mercier and Clint Bearden aren't great people. That's not the point. Mm-hmm. The reality is that if you're the Speaker of the House, it should be really hard for someone that works for you to go in a position, and it might even be unfair to them. But if there's the mere appearance that you're influencing that decision, it shouldn't happen. So when he comes out in response to getting his hand smacked, and I would suggest what I did in April was more than that, but the initial hand smack, and he goes, well, I'm going to put a group of people together that I'm going to pick, and we're going to change the law. And you know what that occurred to me? I thought, oh my, I'm serious.
Perfect.
No. Here's what the folks like me, they literally, I'm serious. You know this, right? Here we go. They change the law.
Yeah.
Okay, no, seriously, let's pause on that for a minute. Okay, to make you happy, I'll change the law. The law. I can't change the law, and you can't change. But you know what they can do? They change the law, and that scares the hell out of me, because I get that they're, you know what I mean? And I don't know if they, like, people should kind of get this. Like, they don't like the speed limit that they drive to work. They can change it. And here, he doesn't like the way that this law was frankly, when they changed the legislative leave law, they actually made it worse. But they didn't like that this Judicial Qualifications Commission was out there doing its own thing. Why wouldn't you like that thing doing its own thing? You know what you do with something that's out doing its own thing?
You control it.
You put some measure it. Well, no, if you have a good heart, you give it more money and say, keep doing more work, right? So you look at this and you go, well, provided I live long enough, right? Like, provided somebody doesn't say, you know what, this is getting really inconvenient, so I'm going to take that guy out.
Yeah.
What else? Because this just came to light through the campaign documents and the campaign disclosures.
And this is just this.
That's just this.
So this isn't, I mean, just this year on top of it, right as Ralston was saying, I'm going to appoint, and this was actually an interesting psychological thing, seeing Ralston go to the well and be reactionary, because he's got lots of people working for him. He's usually really he's smart. Okay, I don't like admitting it, but he is. It'd be dumb to ignore that. Was actually made all the representatives seem like he was doing something honorable on top of it, because he doesn't usually come across as the person who's reacting and apologizing.
Yeah, I'm in government, and I'm going to investigate the government.
But while that was being done, the days following, they passed a bill that would give more legislative leave opportunities to the Attorney General. There, it is only and the people who work for the Attorney General on cases that he's pursuing, something like that. I think there was like 13 oppositions to that bill. It is only a matter of time before somebody who's Attorney General abuses that, and then after that, time is allowed for people to notice it, and hopefully journalists or simple citizens can expose it. But the same thing is going to happen. So it's not about fixing a wrong. It was actually the thing that surprised me the most, that he said, I did nothing immoral, which
he doubled down. Right?
He did nothing illegal. Okay, if we accept the premise of the law and so forth, he did nothing illegal necessarily.
Are you sure?
I disagree with you.
So
go ahead, keep going.
In the way that the Georgia Constitution has multiple, I'm talking about dozens of ways that it violates the U.S. Constitution, then yes, it's illegal. But within their little like prism of like Georgia Constitution and Georgia law necessarily, and it's complicated. I'll give you that it is also illegal. I shouldn't look at it in that like vacuum.
Can I just pop one thing in there though?
Yeah, of course.
Do it.
Just back when I was an FBI agent, you know what I didn't care about? I didn't care about your state legislation. I didn't care about your state laws. That's
a whole nother conversation.
That's GBI. That's GBI work.
My point is, I hear what you're saying, but and I don't want to take you off track. That somebody says he hasn't done anything illegal, and I go, yeah. So precisely on what basis are you saying that? He doesn't need to know he did something illegal to have done something illegal. Number one,
that's also true.
But there's a number of very problematic scenarios that play themselves out in this, which we'll come back to.
Let's do it.
Sure. I mean, my point is that they passed the same law to give more legislative leave to the Attorney General, right as Ralston was saying that the law was going to be changed. And so to let the person who abused the law and did something immoral say that he's going to fix it, and the fact that most of them trusted him to do that, they went to the well and gave interviews saying that this is a great thing, I find just insane. And this is the reason
there's
why
no forward looking. It's save our bacon right now. Let's pass some more legislation to save our own bacon. Let's not look forward, because we're going to execute these laws.
Well, let me ask you this: why did they pass that? And I've got, if we have the ability to do it, I have him in an amazing lie. Right, because if people really want to hear a great lie, I got a great lie, and we'll come back to that. Lie, L-I-E, lie.
Yeah.
Why did they change it? Why did they change the law? Why did they change the law? What was the if this had not here's just a simple philosophical question. Why?
it's politics.
I mean, it had nothing to do with somehow making it a better place for the citizens of this state. And when they go, well, we empowered the victims and the prosecutors and the judges to object. Well, I found a judge, woohoo, no one talked about this right up until I launched it, that held him in contempt and said, get this done in 10 days or you go to jail.
Now.
Right? That feels like the judge was able to do something, right? And so to say that, well, now, we say you can do something, whoa. And then they expanded some other areas of it. And I look at this and I think it was just another example of looking at us proletariat, insignificant minions in cogs in a wheel that we own, and you are irrelevant.
Yeah.
Right? You're irrelevant.
It's the free market of politics, kind of. It means that they gave as little as they needed to, because there's a cost for the problem to go away.
Yeah.
They bought off the populace's unfortunately apathy.
And to say it very bluntly, just so every knuckle dragger out there can understand, right, is when they changed the law, they already knew how this would be, affected. I can make money off of this, right? And that's really what it is. I can make money off of changing this law, being the Speaker of the House, and now I'm going to, line my own pockets.
You're talking about the first
you're
time
about
they changed
2006.
the law.
And
I'm talking about now when
even
they
then,
changed it to make us feel like something good was happening.
And so but to your point, it all went bad with what they did in 2006.
Yeah.
So you don't have to be that smart. You get on your computer, you hit a couple buttons, your computer went nuts, undo what you did, right? Just undo, go back to before you did what you did.
Yeah.
So just go back to before you could use the legislative leave to take it outside of session, which is where we got them in a really, really...
Do you have that audio now?
We probably didn't have any lawyers who are also representatives. They probably didn't even exist.
Let's try this. If you can put it.
Well, no. If you have the adapter for the Apple, we can.
It's over there, man.
Let's see.
I've got it in my bag. If you can wait like 30 seconds, it'll be better.
We'll wait for the adapter.
Oh my goodness, that was
You guys
fast.
just don't know what to say without me, do you?
Yep.
There you go.
Banks is back. All right.
Plug that in, and plug the other thing in.
How old I must look to Banks when he's explaining to me how to plug something in. Now, do I have to lick the end of it, Banks, or do I just plug it in as is?
Now we're getting.
No, we're not. Okay.
Shane can deal with that.
Yeah, I'll do the editing.
Okay. Let's see. Let's see here. Should I set up the truth and let him speak?
Yeah. I mean, we got time. This is a podcast, for God's sakes.
Here's the truth. The truth is what he says that he did once. I have 49 copies of.
Is that all?
That's like a lot more. That's like what? Like 4,000?
49 more times?
Yeah, I mean like in percentage though.
Yeah. It's 49 times as much as he said he did it.
So in this little clip, he's asking, hey, these people are coming out against you and they're saying that you changed the law to benefit yourself. What say you to these people? Okay, and that might be part of this, and here's his response. And the punchline is the truth, and the truth is that it's not one, as he's about to tell us. It's 49 times minimally.
Oh, let's hear
it. This is something you helped write to take advantage. I mean, just go with that. You've read all the headlines that, the 2006 law you helped write in effort to continue to hold your cases out of court. So tell us a little bit about that.
I think from 2006 until 2010, I think I used one continuance in 4 years under the revision to the law.
Well, let's listen to that maybe just one more time. Here we go.
So good.
2006 until 2010, I think I used one continuance in 4 years under the revision to the law.
Okay. No, you didn't. And no, you didn't. And what's lost in this broadcast, but maybe you can do it, is the look, the ease with which he looks the person interviewing him in the face. And he looks him. He looks up and he looks in his face. And I watch this over and over again because I used to have to understand deception, right? So there's a lot of different components to deception. The ease with which he definitively, with particularity, said one continuance. And I'm holding 49 as he's saying this, right?
Sociopathic.
Right. So it's absolutely. And so, of course, it's a whole nother story about why that video is not up now, because the author of that video asked me to take it down, which is
give it to me. I'll put it up.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's out there for common use in YouTube. But so the reality is that you have this scenario where there's simply no reason to look at anything that he says without saying, well, now I have to test the veracity of your comments, because not only was that not true, but the ease with which you said that definitively, as if this matter's now done. I've told you I used it once in 4 years. And listen, it would have been, if he had just said, well, I didn't use it that often, this isn't a conversation. So to me, it's actually a very arrogant thing to do, because it's like, you will believe what I say.
Yeah.
You will not research what I said. And it just is. And now
this
move on.
day and age too. Like this isn't a small thing where you're being accused of changing the law to use it to your financial advantage. You've already got 500 plus continuances out there that we already knew of. You brought to light over 900, and I think it's actually more like
it's 1,091.
Yeah, it's 1,091. I don't know who led with 900 out there.
Well, what they're doing is they're saying from the
safe.
time he became speaker going forward.
Okay.
So they were discounting everything before that. Although from 2006 to 2010 was a good.
Well, that is something important to remember, that this is not just about the speaker. Any representative who's also a lawyer can abuse this in the same way.
Absolutely.
Which is actually an interesting. It'd be an interesting percentage to calculate about how many lawyers are also representatives, how much they used it, and how much Ralston's abuse of it is just
there's not as many
exponentially.
There's not as many as you think. I think the number's 38, and we should go deeper and research on this. The AJC took a look, and they didn't find anything material on a number of them. But
but it's reminiscent. I mean, when you look at what's happened in the past, I don't know, decade now, with who's testified in front of Congress even, right? Where you see these people who have amassed a huge amount of power, and they are called to task on what they've done, and people like Hillary Rodham Clinton or Brennan or Clapper or Strzok.
They just lie.
They just lie straight to the face, and they think they're never going to get found out, man, and nothing's going to happen.
And this comes back to what we're kind of talking about. Well, how are you going to engage the people if what's in your heart is capable of looking someone in the eye and just lying? And we all, I always say I'm too dumb to live like that, because I couldn't keep up with it. And here's a deal where, and that, by the way, that was a statement he made after his statement in the well. So it was fresh. He was doing the deflection thing.
Yep.
Hey, nothing to look at here. And I don't want to be overly cynical, but as I was saying, you have to look at these little markers in time, and in and of themselves, you go, okay, well, that's not that big a deal, maybe. Although that's a big deal, because that's not people going, well, did he do anything wrong? Well, here's actually a quantifiable example of where this is a objective example of him being dishonest. But at some point, like I got asked a couple times by different individuals in this conversation, some legislators, have you considered sitting down with David Ralston and just talking to him about this? Think about that.
Is David Ralston going to sit down with you and talk about this?
David Ralston won't even sit down with certain state reps. Like, ask Matt how hard it is for him to get an interview or like a sit down with David Ralston these days.
Yeah.
It's literally his lawyer sometimes, after Matt makes a official request to sit down with Ralston, comes and says, hey, what's the problem, Matt?
Is this kind of like placating you in a certain way, doing a little of that to say, why wouldn't you just sit down with him first before you bring this all out to the media?
Well, or maybe so he could look me in the eye and smile and give a big belly chuckle and tell me he's only done this once, and I should, here's a sucker and a pen with the Speaker of the House's name on it, and go about my business.
At this point, he'd probably do more. He'd say, hey, you seem like a really ethical guy. I'll put you on a committee that he invents like 2 seconds later.
Yeah, I think that
I get asked this question quite
all
often.
the time.
I'll tell you, and it's not Ralston. It's the others out there that I'm obviously browbeating to say, well, why don't you just text him first? Why don't we have a private conversation first? You're a public official. For God's sakes, I don't need to have a private conversation with you. Answer the damn questions. What are the constituents? I digress, because we're just going to repeat some history.
Yeah.
What, in terms of other light, the things that you have uncovered.
Yeah.
One of the things that struck me, and I want to play it if you're ready for it, and I'm going to throw it up on the screen, is when you kind of went through the State versus Key.
It's brutal.
So I do. I would like to comment on that specific video before, so people don't forget it. If you don't mind, Shane.
Yeah.
I just have a question. You said the person there's the person who put out that video asked you to take it down.
Yes.
And you took it down after that.
I took it down because I was headed up to a interview with him after that prior. So I think I put it up, and I was already scheduled to do an on camera. Yeah. That on camera interview made me kind of realize why he didn't want it down, and I think there's a fair amount of support for the speaker, and he didn't care for that. Now this was put out there on YouTube, so under common use, right?
Sure.
So, which means, and you agree that
I'm not questioning your
no,
decision,
I'm
by the way. I'm trying to understand.
No, I want your audience to understand that he didn't have a title to this that said that I couldn't reuse it, because all I did is I took it, I cut out the relevant pieces. I didn't chop anything. It was him asking the question and the speaker answering it. But when he saw that, and somebody told me, hey, he's probably going to ask you to take that down. So when he did, I thought, well, okay, because at that point people had kind of seen it, but it might pop back up again. You never know.
I find it weird. I know Brian Pritchard. He's a nice guy.
Yeah.
I assume it's Brian. He's the one who
know.
owns Fetch Your News. if that's new information, I apologize.
Any effort I was trying to do to not make that obvious, you just killed.
Well,
I think he's a nice guy, but he wanted it taken down.
Yeah, I mean, he's a nice person. Like, lots of people are nice people, but I find it weird for a journalist who has failed in some respects, because if you let somebody give information that's patently false, and you're a journalist, like he's not like a citizen or a commentator like us who can make lots of mistakes. But then after failing, and it's fine to fail, people fail all the time, and you might not have enough time to do all the background work, then asking somebody else to take down what is effectively another piece of journalism that corrects one of his failures.
Right.
Or
I've used the word failure a lot here, and I don't mean to.
Or add to
I'll
it.
tell you. How about here's an alternative?
Seems...
Here's an alternative. How about it was a win? You uncovered something,
I didn't even think of that.
Working together, we've just.
Yeah.
So I looked at that and I thought, well, good on you. Great, right? You got him to commit to something that we've been able to demonstrate was a patent lie. And I told him that when I went up and I spent time with him.
And he sees his own failure.
And I told him 3 different times. I brought them with me. I've got the 49 examples of a lie, right? Because it's true, and at number 2, it's a lie. And number 3 is a lie, right? Oh, no, wait, true. Nope, it's a lie.
Yeah, so good job.
Where's the correction? Where's the thing that says, you know what, I got lied to?
He should be excited about that. You're right. I didn't even think
well,
of that. But it's
any of you guys that are into craft, right? I mean, for me, it's woodworking and things like that. The maker always sees their own glaring mistakes before everybody else, where most people never ever see that kind of stuff. And I can see it in this kind of thing. It's where you kind of go, oh man, did you see that huge gouge that and nobody else saw. Everybody else is just going, man,
I see it, Shane.
That's beautiful. Are you kidding me? Like, I understand.
Yeah. And most of your work,
tough.
I see it too.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry for the interruption there, but I did want to point that out.
You know what I mean. Yeah, please make fun of it all you want. But do you want me to go ahead and preface this? This is when Derek was down at the Capitol. They were at the meeting. I'm going to throw it up here on the big screen here behind Derek, and I'm going to throw it up in that corner as to play it behind your right side there, Derek.
This is in the way again.
Yeah, this is at the very end. This is State versus Key, aggravated child molestation, enticing a child for sexual purposes, and transmitting sexually explicit material to a child who is under the age of 16. This case has been around for over almost 10 years, but 9.8 years, with 44 total continuances. This, to me, is, with everything else that's going on, the money, the power, and everything else, this is what I find more reprehensible than all of it. And maybe, Derek, you can out-reprehensible me with him later, but do you want to say anything before I play this piece?
Yeah, I want to say this. This alone should be enough.
Yeah.
Right? This alone. This one alone should be enough for because anyone who sees what you're about to see that hasn't seen it already, anyone who has seen it, and let's preface this. Listen, the guy is innocent till proven guilty. And I'm not interested. We're railing against the abuse of the system, and I don't want to now abuse it a different way. I don't. This guy is, but this is a solid case.
Yeah.
This is enough. The 1,080 1,080 others should not be necessary. This, and by the way, that's Marine math and not even close. but the 1,050 others should not even be necessary. This is yes.
This is one of those where, with kids, I think most of us feel the same way, is when you mess with kids and they are denied justice for whatever reason. There's a come to Jesus moment. I want you guys to take a listen to this.
I looked very close at the state versus Key. I looked very close at Ralston's actions in this case and regarding his client. I looked very, very closely. And while most people who are familiar with Ralston's use of legislative leave and the recent reports of it are already familiar with this case, there are a few important details to it that have not been generally circulated. As a matter of background, Ralston's client was indicted in 2009 by Gilmer County for transmitting sexually explicit material to a juvenile under the age of 16 and enticing a child for sexual purposes also under the age of 16. Cherokee County also indicted Ralston's client, charging him with aggravated child molestation. Ralston's client was 29 at the time, the victim, both of which being under 16. In all, I identified a total of 44 legislative leave continuances that Ralston applied to his client's 2 cases. As many as 33 of those continuances appear to be out of session. In September of 2010, after his case was continued for legislative leave 4 times, Ralston's client was rearrested after being observed hanging out at a middle school football game. He was granted a new bond with the instruction that he would avoid any area where minors congregate. In December of 2012, his client traveled to Haiti and per online post worked with children while on a Christian mission trip. Numerous photographs of Ralston's clients with children in Haiti were observed. By this time, Ralston had issued 18 total continuances on this case. As I said earlier, I'm not a legal expert, but I believe most of us would assume that his client would need permission from the courts to leave the country and that he was still under order of the court to not spend time in areas where children congregate. On December 19th of 2012, while in Haiti, Ralston's client was involved in a bad auto accident. 3 days later, the Gilmer Times-Courier reported online that, quote, after getting the U.S. Embassy and state legislators involved, including House Speaker David Ralston, Derek Key arrived back in the States by Learjet this morning from the Dominican Republic, unquote. This is in the newspaper. Well, after 28 continuances to his aggravated child molestation cases and over 6 years after indictments were issued, Cherokee County dropped their case 14 months later. Ralston's client was back in Haiti in 2014 and pictured yet again with teenage boys. I highlight this case for 3 reasons. Number 1, the sheer volume of continuances in such an important criminal matter is simply staggering. Secondly, to illustrate that individuals charged with serious crimes whose cases are indefinitely delayed are able to conduct themselves in public in a manner that may not be in the best interest of public safety. And finally, given the extraordinary way in which Key has benefited from being a client of the speakers, I highlight this case in the hopes that the media and other appropriate agencies will look deeper into the nature of Ralston's relationship with his client and perhaps determine whose jet was used, who paid for it, and any other questions emanating from this event. I want to conclude by returning to my motivation for conducting this exhaustive review of Speaker Ralston's use of legislative leave. This is not now, nor has it ever been, about politics for me. It's about accountability. It's about transparency. And it's about truth. It's about standing firmly and courageously in defense not only of victims' rights, but in defense of what is moral and what is ethical. I will close by reminding us all that great leaders use their power not to delay justice, they use their power to expedite justice. The people of Georgia deserve nothing less than that. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, I've listened to that one before, and I'm still flabbergasted. And Derek's right. It doesn't matter who the person is. The key in this case, it's what has been allowed, and what can happen, what has happened. So it's not even what can happen; it's what has happened.
This is why I'm a bull, man. This is why people perceive me as one of those guys that is maybe a little too passionate, maybe crazy. I don't know, whatever you want to call it. I don't care. But this, when I don't have representatives at least saying, look at this. We are investigating. We are taking a look at this. There are things going on behind the scenes that I cannot reveal right now, but we are looking at this. Give me an update every week. I need to know one way or another that you're still involved with this right here.
Yeah.
Or at least be timely responsive. I think that's the level.
The bare minimum for me. Outside of that, I'd like to see a lot more guys coming out and just saying this is wholly unacceptable, and we're going to do everything we can to make this right.
You know, and I appreciate you sharing that because I haven't watched much of this. So much coverage came out, and it was amazing. But I didn't watch much of it because I was there.
Yeah,
but
I know what you said.
I was there. I know what I said.
Yeah, I don't listen to the podcast.
You probably know this, so I mean, you're almost choked to the gills with it.
Yeah, but you know, we can talk about that conference in a minute because it's a pretty surreal experience, and what cut off there is the applause at the end of it, which was really neat.
Yeah, and sorry about that. I didn't know if you wanted to listen to it, but yeah, they actually, you had a room full of press and imagine a few other people, but I think from what I was told that the representatives were told that they will not go to this press conference. Is that correct? Do you know?
I don't know. I know it was David and I.
Yeah.
Right.
But
during that whole time, one of the victims was the only one that I knew was sitting up front, and as I was delivering all of this, and I want to come back to the key case, but she was right there, and she's wiping tears throughout the whole thing, right? And you realize, like, these are real people.
Yeah.
And this is what pisses me off because how are you not outraged by this? Why? And here's the thing. Say, you know, here, if I'm an elected individual, say, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'll tell you what, I'm horrified by. Who's not horrified by this? And that's the part where, and I will tell you, I've talked to a lot of lawmakers, and there's some people that right now that are doing all the right things, and I want to say that, and there's certain things you just can't do right now. You can't make a spectacle of what you're doing. There's and there's no reason to go past that because you know how pragmatic I am about these things. But I'll tell you what, there will be, when this is all done and said, there will be people who were elected by Georgians who will not take exception with that.
Yep.
And here's where I will come over to the Shane Hazel school of courtesy. Those people, when this is done and said, that do not, hey, listen, fine, say I don't want to remove the speaker, whatever, but come out and say that you're absolutely, unequivocally, without question, horrified by this. Otherwise, I got some pretty deep pockets. I got plenty of time, and you think that this is the only thing out there? No one has seen me really focused yet, right? And there's a lot more out there like me, and I think at this point that people should brace themselves for their representatives to not have done the right thing and be prepared. And by the way, I'll tell you too.
And we're there. You are on the cusp of the next election now.
Yeah.
If they're not laying tracks and plans for replacing some of these people, you're too late.
Yeah. And it's what's interesting too is there are national players that have reached out to me that said, we see what you're doing and we're going to help replace some of these people. And the national people with national pull, people that you guys are familiar with.
Yep.
It's like they're horrified that this could happen, and they love the conversation that's taking place, and they want to set an example of how this is supposed to work. And of course, there are people that are interested in protecting the party as well. Mm-hmm. But and I don't want to convolute those two issues. There are people that have taken a stand, and I think and they took a stand on much less information than we have
a
now.
moral stand.
Well, no, and
not
they,
just a political stand.
Right. And they took it on much less.
Yeah.
What I laid out just a couple of weeks ago should make everybody go, well, okay, that's it, I'm done. I mean, like that's it. I know I'm the godfather of your child, but you did this. Yeah. I don't know if you did anything illegal, but this is horrible. Yeah. Oh, but here's another thing. We're going into redistricting year, Speaker, and I don't want us to lose the House.
You start.
I don't know, but holy cow, some outrage.
You start looking at.
There are actually some. There is one representative who not only took the "I'm not going to do anything," but came out in vehement support. I mean, he wrote like an article on Facebook saying why this was all perfectly fine, and it's a funny but weird and sad coincidence that he's also the one who introduced the bill to create an ethics board for journalism, and then right after he did that, said he's resigning and not running for re-election.
It makes you think is when the ship's going down and the rats are trying to get off the ship, as not to get found out if something else pops on this. And you're sitting there going, there is criminality. There are things going on, and the people who are running to the defense on this one, holy cow! You got something else in store for you.
He understands politics. His name is Representative Andy Welch, because we need to give names out there because then people don't know.
Well, now you know how to contact him.
About.
Yeah, that's right.
Exactly, but he understands politics. He was a state rep for 10 years, also a lawyer. Defended Ralston perfectly, introduced this bill, and you'll have lots of people often who say, well, you just introduce a bill like anybody can introduce a bill. I mean, my friend Matt can introduce a bill, and he can say anything he wants in the bill. It doesn't mean anything. But he understands it actually does mean something. You start a conversation like this, it's gotten tons of press. There's other states who have introduced bills like this. There's the city of Peachtree City has introduced a bill kind of like this to say, hey, we need like some overview of journalists.
Yeah, they tried to, didn't they? Yeah.
And then he leaves because he knows his district is changing, and this it'd be pretty bad to like defend Ralston to that degree, and then go through an election.
A little bit.
I don't like making predictions because I could be wrong, but something, if he gets appointed somewhere, I would not be surprised whatsoever.
That's how it works.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's always how it works, for God's sakes.
And this is the same reason why the Democrats, the idea of protecting the party, I don't think it's the priority. I think the priority is protecting the idea of justice and the rights enumerated in the Constitution. But there are people who want to defend the party, being the Republican Party.
Oh.
I don't think they necessarily understand how much damage it does to the Republican Party, and how most Republicans, who tons of them used to be Democrats, not Ralston, but don't really care because the power structure within the state
matter for them.
Within the state house, you've got the Republicans vote against 6% of bills. It's Republican controlled. The Democrats vote against like 10 or 11% of bills. Meaning most of the time they all agree on everything, and the Democrats are getting so much. Again, not my highest priority, but still, the Democrats literally are able to still get the stuff done because they realize that most of the bills that pass are increasing government, which is what the Democrats usually want to do anyways. And that is why they're not opposing Ralston, because if they oppose him, he stops them. The Democrats don't get everything they want, but they get a lot of what they want.
Well, it's because the Republicans are mostly Southern Democrats to begin with. They're not, and the other thing is they're not fighters. Democrats don't care. They'll go out and swing for the fences any chance they get, and the Democrats will back them up. There are some
that are willing to fight more, but they're choosing to just
generally
go
speaking,
in line. They get the best of both worlds. They get to continue to have power until they actually take full power, which is not that far off, and then they get to attack the Republicans during the state house elections and say, hey, you supported Ralston, he's horrible.
Yeah.
And the fact that not enough people are saying, hey, like this is insane, the amount of ammunition you're giving to the Democrats is crazy.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, by the way, because I've had a lot of lawmakers reach out to me in the House and the Senate. Yeah. Not one Democrat.
Not yet.
Not one has reached out and said, hey,
and
we'd like to better understand.
They haven't reached out and said thank you yet, huh?
I specifically know that there are, not all of them necessarily, but dozens were asked personally by the David Clarks of the world, whoever was sent on that mission, and they were like, we just can't do that.
Here's something that I wish more people would do. I did it with my local GOP chair, Patrick Bell. I said, do you have an official statement on this in terms of Ralston? And I'll tell you right now, Patrick Bell, you're protecting the party right now is going to come back and bite not only you, but the party right in the ass.
So do you know if in your GOP they tried to introduce a resolution
I was
against
there.
Ralston?
Yeah.
So I was there, and one was carried to it, I believe, by Sherry Gilligan, who came out early, and she warned me ahead of time, hey, Derek, here's what they're going to do. They're going to do this, they're going to do that. By the end, it's going to get adjourned, and we're not going to get a chance to introduce it. And so even though we had a member of our delegation that took a lead on this, it never was able to be introduced. And then I was at the district for the 9th, well, we're in the 7th here, and a similar thing happened, right?
So I heard from
it happened in quite a bit of them, though. And
so in the 11th and in Cobb County, because of a ragtag bunch of people, we actually passed a resolution in the county and the district.
Yeah.
It's not the strongest thing in the world,
but
it passed even though the chairman of the 11th absolutely categorically did not want it to pass, which is, as much as the party can be really, you can step over it and get involved in politics more directly. It is interesting that the largest Republican county in Georgia, which is still Cobb County, even though it went blue last time just because of population, passed a resolution saying they want Ralston to step down. And it's got some, again, not the strongest wording, but it's got some strong words still.
Yeah, but for a chairman, and that's the thing is, if you've got chairmen that aren't out there right now calling for this resignation as well, or working behind the scenes to make sure that this happens, those guys need to be replaced. The Republican Party has a real come to Jesus moment coming.
Well, right, and here's one of the things that I'm hearing from a lot of people, and that is, well, you know what? If they don't do the right thing, and I'm not exaggerating, I'm hearing this from a lot of people, the same thing, just in different versions.
Yeah.
If they don't do the right thing, I'm not knocking on doors for them. I'm not making phone calls for them. I'm not going to do it. I'm done. If this is what we stand for, and if this is what we stand for, and again, it brings you back to the silence is your consent. You can't say you don't have a position on this. You do have a position on it, and if you can't speak it, your position is you're okay with it.
Yep, and that default.
Yeah.
And that's the problem they don't understand. This is not going to go away.
No.
I'm going to keep hammering it. I'm sure you've got a bunch still to go through.
You're going to get me killed.
And I got your back, man. I'll tell you right now. You're of sound mind. I'm
doing really well.
Your sound body.
I think so.
You got your car's all on regular maintenance, I imagine.
This is I didn't kill myself or die in an accident checklist.
You're damn right it is.
Everything's good.
We used to do this with each other all the time.
Yeah.
You're good. I'm good. Let's put it on video so that if anything ever happens, this is one of those things.
The first time I ever felt like I needed to do that, which sounds silly, but preparation is good, is I remember my first candidate, Charles Gregory, who was in office for one term only, unfortunately. He got sent a DVD with like nothing on it. And it was a video of the funeral of Bobby Franklin, who was a previous state rep, who died of natural causes.
Yeah. And
we just sat in front of each other for hours and talked about some other stuff. And at the end, we just said, yeah, we don't want to play into conspiracies, but that's just makes us very uneasy.
When there is literally billions of dollars in livelihoods and everything else on the line.
Don't make it sound like there's reasons to do this. Let's just leave it at that. Well,
54 billion to be exact.
One of the things we should, though, because we never really hit this, is what I did. What I found out of those of the 8 counties that I went to was 1,091 continuances. Yeah. On 137 civil cases and 142 criminal cases. And so because of that, you have to remember in those criminal cases, the victim almost always is the state.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's the state versus so-and-so. And, you find all these prosecutions that get dropped because the state never... the state they
never see them inside the courtroom.
Right. And so the victim there is actually the entire state.
Yeah.
Right. We're all victims in this. And then those civil cases, some of those were even more heartbreaking because you watch people just, there's one case, it's 17 years. It's been delayed by him. And you've got a couple who's not able to access their land because Ralston's client had Ralston take a lien out on that property when they bought it. They've been paying a mortgage for 17 years and they can't access their property after 17 years. Wow. Right, for the entirety of Banks's life.
And they're paying, I was going to say, they're paying taxes.
So,
I still feel like a 17-year-old.
I do too. But here's my commitment, and that is today I put everything out there I put the link out there on Facebook,
Yeah.
which is good. And that's a link to a Dropbox that has everything in there, everything I accumulated, all the scans. And we've got to get that out there because I want people to look at it for themselves. And I'll tell you, there's something that happens when you look at the documents and you see the signature and you see it over and over and you see somebody say, well, I can't. And remember, these are all responsive, these continuances.
Yeah.
So it's not him saying, I just want to let you know for the next 6 months, these are the dates I can't be there. No, the court's asking them to prom and they're saying, hey, we want you to come. We got prom next week. And he says, I can't make it. Okay, we'll reschedule it. Can you come in a month? No. Okay, we'll reschedule it. Now we're going to schedule it for 2 months out. No, I can't make that one. Okay, we're going to schedule it for 3 weeks after that. No. And it's no, 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 no. And after a while, you look at this and you go, wait a minute. Like, not once. You've got continuances in there. You got one where he took off from mid-November of 1 year until the end of the session the next year. And he said, certifies to the court, well, I'm going to be, every day in between those periods, I'm going to be engaged in legislative duties and obligations. You go, well, Thanksgiving's in there. Christmas is in there every day. But I keep coming back to 1 versus 49. You look at this and you just go, okay, wait a minute. And then you'll hear this argument, I got this one. Well, you don't understand how congested the courts are up here. We only have a few judges and it's just really bad. Well, geez, who's in charge of basically how the money moves around in the state? Is there anyone in the state that could get money earmarked to put another judge up there? Who could do such a thing?
Oh, I know.
Wait, go. Banks for 400.
It's literally Ralston. They added one judge this past session to, I think, the North Mountain District or something like that.
Probably appointed him.
And then here's another novel idea. Let's say that you just simply have too many cases.
Yeah.
But now you have a $99,000 a year job. So why don't you reduce your legal practice by $99,000 a year in clients? That's probably 15 or 20 clients. So there's no way to say that you can't do this. And someone would say, well, during the legislative leave session, you can't blame them for that. And I go, okay, fine. I don't like it, but okay. But that means the out of session becomes that much more important. You have to. And then they'll say, well, you don't understand, Derek. You might sometimes they only have an opportunity once a year to make that court trial. And you go, then you have to go because if you don't, you kick that can down the road for another year.
Again, he doesn't have to be Speaker of the House. He doesn't have to be a representative. He can be a private citizen. So I've had people kind of express sympathy for, he's a very busy man.
Yeah.
Nobody asked him. Actually, there's some people who have specifically asked him not to take on that role. And you know what? Does a neurosurgeon have a right to be the Speaker of the House? What about a CPA? What about anybody else? Because the law right now only allows one profession to do this, right? And you don't have to be a lawyer. If you're a legislator and you're subject to a lawsuit or a discovery, you also have some protection too. But the point is, if you're a CPA, well, most taxes are due right around mid-April.
Yeah.
During the session.
Yep.
Most of the time, but there's nothing statutorial that in this state
Sure.
that says that you get any leeway. So there's this other part that says there's 38, I think, lawyers in maybe in the House and the Senate. Why are they bestowed the magic cheat code for
what they're doing
for occupational delay?
That's right.
Right. Why not a neurosurgeon? Why not the guy that owns the car wash? Why not everybody? So here's a novel concept because they're not going to get rid of this thing. Why don't you just take it, number one, back to 2006 and say it's out of session. You don't get a continuance. You can ask for a continuance the way every other lawyer has to, and the court can grant that or not grant that based on the merit of the request, but not through compelled shall grant language, number one.
Yep.
And then number two, if you don't like that, don't hold office or don't practice law.
Don't take the clients. And it's real
So many
black.
options.
It's so black and white.
No, I
Golly.
know. No, it's unbelievable. And trust me, I've heard them all. But I really appreciate what you guys are doing because this is what I've done up to this point. Well, number one, you encouraged, and that's good because you've been supportive along the way. But it
Yeah, we make you seem like a nice guy.
Well, I'll tell you what. If I did not want to be out in front on this issue, that day has come and passed. But without different individuals lending their platform and their voice, this dies. And it's occurred to me our power truly is in the ability to come together. It doesn't have to be philosophically. We can pick this thing and say, you know what, this is wrong, and I have 300 followers. I'm going to share it with mine. And well, I have 5,000. I'm going to share it with mine, and I'm going to share. That's you go from irrelevant to formidable very, very quickly, very quickly. So I think apathy is the is the enemy here. Time is the enemy here. And for all those people that hear this, if you're not following what I'm doing, we'll get a link out to my Facebook page. I'm not. It's just content, and share it, because that's the thing that's making this unavoidable.
Yeah, and that's the thing is this is the first time we're probably going to have video, and I'm going to chop it up and I'm going to put it out in its entirety. I'm going to work as tirelessly as I can with the time that I have to do it, to release this little bits at a time, because you know how we're in a soundbite culture. If you can put together 2 or 3 minutes here and there, people will actually listen to it. Maybe they'll get intrigued to actually listen to the entire thing. And then before you know it, what you've got is people following the story because they have common ground together. And it's people out there listening right now. You're the people that are going to make the difference. If you're not calling your state reps, if you're not getting involved, doing things within your own party, you can reach out and touch your local chapter of Republicans, your local chapter of Democrats, your local chapter of Libertarians. The chairs of this should all try to get something out. Put it out on Facebook so that people in those communities know. I mean, this is on us, and we have the power to do it. It's just a matter of reaching down and actually doing something.
And it's a safe bet. I was thinking about this the other day. If we polled this in every district in the state, and we just randomly polled, say, do you support the speaker's actions, yes or no, and do you support him stepping down from the leadership? Could you poll anything that would actually produce a higher set of numbers in terms of a common view on a topic right now in the political arena?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't have any idea that, you guys are a lot more versed on this than I am, but I'm assuming it polls at 85 or 90%. And so you look at this and you go, if ever there was an opportunity just to do the thing that your people want you to do, you've got their backing. This is actually one of those few things that I think
it's not
all
partisan.
of us, we are truly aligned on this.
Yeah.
And that's, how often does that happen, that we have the ability to go, you know what, I'm with you.
Well, and what's really crazy is what you see is this exposes state versus the people. And that's what I see all the time with this kind of stuff, is they expose themselves in their support or obviously taking a stand against the state.
I think the message of taking action is particularly important. I think it would poll 70, 80, 90. Yeah. I think it should poll 100%, but that's just me. But those numbers kind of are parallel to the numbers of people who don't approve of Congress. And that should double down and remind people that once you get off the podcast, and I'll include a link in the show notes to the Dropbox and to Derek's Facebook. So it's not that hard. But to remember to make the extra effort to actually take the action. If you're doing email marketing, if you're like, the open rate for emails is like 15% if you're lucky in politics. The action rate is like 0.5 to 1%. Our audience is wonderful, but the action rate for doing certain things, I've gotten on our links in the show notes like 50% open rate to look at a book or something, but it could be literally 100% more if 100% of the people clicked on it. So just remember, take the extra action to, at the end of the podcast, click, go to the Facebook page, find your favorite post, the one you think is most important, and share it.
Yep.
And to remind us of that, this is Javed's favorite quote, who was an intern on Shane's campaign.
Awesome guy.
It's from Plato. The price of apathy towards public affairs is to be ruled by evil men.
Yep.
Which is literally what is happening.
Yeah. You closing thoughts or anything else that you want to impart before we kind of start wrapping this up? And I think we'll close here, Banks, instead of doing an outro separately.
That works with me.
No, just again reiterating the importance of the what we just talked about right now, and that is, don't underestimate what your one share can do, because what you would do is you enable something after you that could go on, could reach across the country, right?
That's right.
Like, you don't know. And so what's the harm in it? My Facebook bill doesn't come back based on clicks, right? and the real power in this is really that we have truth, and truth amplified is a extremely powerful thing. So here's the truth. Now let's get out and amplify it.
That's right.
And above all, and I want to say this too, do reach out to your representatives, but reach out in the spirit that you support them taking a stand. I believe this is what needs to happen. I support you if you do this. I understand the potential consequences to our district if you do this, and I'm okay with them because I put you there in the first place. I'm with you. Go do this.
I love it. Let's wrap this up.
Yeah, I've got one conclusion I want to make that
all
I
right.
think is just very important. All this, talking about the power that is in the wrong place and the abuse thereof and how to structure the system so this happens less. I mean, the only, I think, logical conclusion to that is, okay, there's rules that we can establish, is that we need less government in the first place. If there weren't 2,000 people to be appointed, you wouldn't have to appoint people to appoint them.
That's right. So I want to plug Derek's page real quick. You can go on Facebook. It's Derek, Derek, Somerville, Somerville. Had to look that up. Obviously, Marine can't spell anything. He's got all this information there. I imagine you have links there so that they can find all the documents there as well. Go out there, look it up, share the heck out of it. I really can't thank you enough for coming in, Derek. Once again, sir, this has been an absolute pleasure and education. We've sat down and we put down an hour and 45 minutes, guys. So well
that
done.
went by really fast.
Yeah,
I appreciate Derek. He keeps us on track more than we allow ourselves to go down rabbit holes that are maybe not the most productive.
Yeah.
And it was So I appreciate that.
And I appreciate all the listeners too. This might be a little Georgia centric, but I guarantee you this is happening in a lot of other states out there. So if we can be any type of model for you guys, go out, find people who are interested in doing things like this, and replicate what we're doing here in Georgia. This has to happen across the United States. I think it is happening in a lot of places. We've got to do more and more. But if you've got complaints, information you want to send us, or anything else, you can go to info@rebellionpod.com. If you'd like to become a patron of the show, you can go to patreon.com/rebellionpod.
As always, this is your place for peace, liberty, and free markets.
We love you. We need you. Peace.
Don't hurt people and don't take their stuff.